we're dealing with that warning. So this is your time again to make sure you are away from windows. If you can get to the most interior part of your home, all of that will help keep you as protected as this strong storm pushes through. I'm going to switch over to velocity to see if we can see something. And we are seeing some reds and greens coming together right now over the Downsville area or just south of Downsville. So if you are located in this area, we'll circle it for you just so you can see what we're talking about, what we're focused on. We're really watching this area right here. So really just south of Downsville at this hour. So if you are in Downsville, if you're south of Downsville, you want to make sure you are inside, away from any windows, because again, we're dealing with the storm that is producing signs of rotation. And right now it's enough where the National Weather Service has issued this tornado warning. We've been fairly fortunate over the last couple of days, even though we've had a lot of rain, we haven't had any threats for tornadic weather. But unfortunately, things started to intensify today. And so that's what we're dealing with. I want to put a storm track on this too, so you can get an idea of more or less how quickly this storm will be moving. It's moving at about 50 miles per hour. So we'll put a track and we'll stretch it out just so you can see what areas downstream may feel the impact of this. So the time now is 5:19. We're looking at a storm that if it keeps on track, it may impact places. It'll likely impact places like Point by the time we get to 5:29, and then eventually Rocky Branch by the time we get to 5:35 p.m. And then beyond that, if the storm holds together, we're looking at storms approaching, this storm in particular, approaching places like Sterlington. Right now, Sterlington is under that tornado warning. So if you are in Sterlington, this is your time, again, to get to the most interior part of your home, get away from windows, so that way you can stay safe until this threat has ended. But we still have another 40 minutes or so of this warning. Now, I do want to show you what else has been happening across the region, and then we'll come back to this tornado warning. Again, this warning covers northern Ouachita Parish, eastern Lincoln Parish, and also southern portions of Union Parish. But just south of the main warning, we're dealing with some very intense storms that are now pushing across central portions of Ouachita Parish. So if you are in Monroe, south of Monroe, or even into northern portions of Caldwell Parish, expect a lot of rain, really strong wind, and even some hail mixing in with this line of intense thunderstorms that are pushing through. But the big story is, again, this tornado warning that is in place. Again, it covers northern Ouachita Parish, also eastern portions of Lincoln Parish, and now southern portions of Union Parish. I want to pull up the velocity one more time just to see if we can pick out again where we're looking at the greatest sign of rotation. And right now it's still in place south of Downsville, but this sometimes, the data can sometimes be a little delayed. So this storm itself is continuing to push to the east. So we'll put another track on this storm. We'll put some cities on the map, towns on the map, so that way you can see what areas will likely feel the impact. So again, Point by the time we get to about 5:30. So you have about 10 minutes or so until this threat more or less pushes out of the area or pushes across your region. And then downstream, we're looking at places like Sterlington by the time we get to 5:46 p.m. And if the storm holds together, we can see impacts for Bastrop in about 40 minutes or so, and then further down Mer Rouge by the time we get to about 6:07 to 6:10. So this is a dangerous situation. We want you to take this very seriously. The storms have been fairly impressive this afternoon and now pushing into the evening. And we've seen a lot of lightning with these storms as well. I want to put our lightning on just so you can see what the lightning is doing right now. And a lot of these storms, again, they have been producing a lot of lightning. But at the moment, there we go. We see some lightning strikes popping up. But again, we've been dealing with a lot of lightning. They were very impressive as they pushed into Monroe. We've already received a number of videos out of the Ruston area of those storms producing lots of lightning. But again, this is the main threat right now, the northern portion of really a long line of intense storms that are currently pushing through central Ouachita Parish. Again, if you're in West Monroe, you're about to be dealing with some very intense thunderstorms, but the main threat is really north of Interstate 20 at this point, and the storm itself is continuing to track to the northeast at about 50 miles per hour. So just to reiterate, This warning will be with us at least through 6 p.m. and it's all because of a thunderstorm that's showing signs of rotation. We don't have a confirmed tornado, but we just have a lot of active weather pushing through. And this one storm in particular has now led to a tornado warning across part of our region. I do want to talk a little bit more too about what else we're seeing across the region. Again, the main activity is really pushing through the heart of our viewing area, but it also extends farther south into Wynn Parish as well. And then we have a few more storms farther to the north and east. Fortunately, these storms are not as intense. While we have seen some severe thunderstorms too across parts of East and West Carroll Parish, a lot of that now is pushing off into Mississippi. So this is a large view of the storm system. Once we get through really the back edge of this precipitation that's pushing through Shreveport, and really once we get through the most intense storms that are pushing through the Monroe area right now, things should start to improve slowly across our viewing area. We'll keep an eye on storms that are currently pushing up from the south because those could potentially lead to more severe storms, severe warnings being issued. But at this point, the worst of the weather is right overhead. And so this will impact any plans that you have ongoing as we head throughout the evening. I do want to talk about generally what we're looking at as well. We have flooding concerns because of all the rain. But again, we have this tornado watch for many of our western parishes that stays with us at least through 9 p.m. And we're still dealing with the slight risk for severe weather. So the threat for severe weather definitely there. So it's now through this evening, heavy rain, severe storms, flooded roads will be an issue. Tough travel will be an issue for us over the next couple of hours. But then after that, we should start to see some improvements. This is a look at how much rain we'll see, additional rain from now through about Wednesday morning. Most of this falling before midnight. Some areas could still pick up at least another 2, potentially 3 inches more of wet weather. And I also want to show you how things will play out with our forecast, our graph model, our futurecast. Well, it shows that we'll be dealing with wet weather over the next couple of hours, those really intense storms pushing through. But by the time we get to 11 o'clock, if not midnight, things should be a lot quieter for us. We'll see improvements there. And that is a good thing. But let's go back to that warning. I know a lot of folks are used to getting additional news at this hour. Well, we're dealing with this tornado warning that is still in place. It has not been confirmed. I'm going to check with the National Weather Service just to see if they have any updates for us. But at last check, we're dealing with just this tornado warning that is with us, and it will stay active for another 35 minutes or so. So again, just to reiterate, if you are located in northern portions, or actually eastern portions of Lincoln Parish, northern portions of Ouachita Parish, southern portions of Union Parish, you really do want to be in your safe area now because we have this dangerous storm pushing through. And again, the clouds are getting fairly dark here. If we can pull up our tower cam, we'll show you the view that we have here from Monroe. Again, those really strong, intense storms pushing through. The clouds are very dark. So again, it's a very ominous sight outside for Monroe, the city of Monroe. You're not under this tornado warning, but if you live on the north side of Monroe, again, that area is very much close to that tornado warning. And if you're in northern Ouachita Parish in general, we have that tornado warning that will stay active. So again, with these tornado warnings, we have them on occasion. We want you to keep your guard up. Again, if you are located across northern Ouachita Parish, southern portions of Union Parish, the threat for severe weather is with us. We have this tornado warning, and we want you to get to your safe area. It looks like the storm system again is continuing to progress east, and now they've decreased the size of that warning. So again, if you are in eastern portions of Lincoln Parish, fortunately, you're no longer under that tornado warning, but it still is in place across southeastern portions of Union Parish and northern portions of Ouachita Parish. And at the moment, here in Monroe and areas farther south, we're dealing with very intense storms pushing through. So the threat for dangerous weather definitely there. I want to pull up the velocity one more time. That's how we can tell more or less if there's rotation going on within the storm. We can try to pinpoint where the most active part of the storm is, at least that's warned. And when we look at it, we're still looking at an area now east of Downsville, mainly across southern portions of Union Parish. I'll circle it for you just so you can see this radar. Once we get a little farther away from the radar, it gets a little tougher to see, but this is the general area that we're watching. So that area is east of Downsville. So if you are in Downsville, for the most part, you are in the clear now. But if you live east of Downsville, you want to stay indoors. And again, we can hear the rain here at the station. These powerful storms starting to push through all of Ouachita Parish at this point, or central portions of Ouachita Parish. But the main threat is this tornado warning that is out there. And let's see if we can get the latest information with that warning, just so you have it. Again, this warning will be with us at least through 6 p.m. So that is the timeline. But the good news is they haven't extended that tornado warning into Morehouse Parish. So that may be a sign that the storm itself is not necessarily gaining strength. The storm itself, it may still be holding together, but ultimately it may start to weaken as well. So again, this warning stays in effect. We don't have any confirmation of a tornado on the ground. But again, the active weather is definitely out there. Let's put the radar into motion too, again, so we can show you how these storms are progressing. This is a look at our satellite and radar view, actually. And again, the storms are definitely having an impact on us, and some of the most intense storm activity currently now pushing through central portions of Ouachita Parish. Let's take another look at our tower cam just so we can see what's going on outside. Just in case you're wondering here in Monroe or areas farther south, what's going on. We have some very heavy weather, very heavy rain pushing through the area. We've even had a few power flashes because of this dangerous weather that's moving through. So let me know if you all can pull up that tower cam. Otherwise, we'll get to it at another point. But again, the threat for dangerous weather currently moving through. And here's a look at our tower cam. Those showers and storms are very intense, again, making it very tough to see across the arc limits at this hour. Again, that dangerous weather having a big impact on us this evening as we head into the evening hours. I do want to show you some additional alerts that are also in place across the rest of the arc limits. Yeah, we can really hear the rain here. You might even be able to pick it up on my microphone, but the rain is coming down very intensely, and it's all due in part to a larger storm system, really a warm front, and eventually an area of low pressure that's currently pushing across our region. But again, the threat for active weather is with us, and so we want you to take this weather very seriously. We put the map into motion one more time, and again, we're looking at the very intense weather that's moving through central, the more or less Ouachita Parish at this point, and the midsection of the arc limits. That's continuing to push east. So I do want to put a track on some of the storms to give you an idea of who else and how long it'll take to impact others as this stormy weather continues to move across our region. So we're going to pull this out farther east. These storms are generally moving to the east. Eventually, for places like Rayville, we'll see storms reach you by the time we get to about 5:40 or so. So in another 10 to 15 minutes. Eventually, for places like Winsboro, we'll see impacts for you as well downstream. And then farther downstream, if the storms hold together, we'll see impacts for places like Tallulah, Newellton, and then eventually Vicksburg. But let's go back to that tornado warning. That's the greatest concern in our area right now. I'll zoom in. Again, things look a lot quieter for places like Downsville. They're still dealing with rain now, but this warning is still with us through 6 p.m. Again, it's still radar indicated, so we haven't had any confirmation of a tornado on the ground. And when we look at velocity, again, at this point, it's still showing signs of potentially some type of rotation going on. I'll circle it for you. At this point, we're looking really at this area right here, so just west of Sterlington. So again, if you are in Sterlington, we need you to be in your safe area right now, because the stormy weather, this tornado warned storm, is continuing to push east. And so we want you, again, to be as safe as possible. Things you can do: if you are in a home, you can get to the most interior part of your home. Also, if you live in an apartment building, you can get to the most interior part of your apartment building. You can go into a windowless room. All of that will help keep you safe in anticipation of a potential tornado moving across your area. This is not your time to go outside and try to see what's happening. This is your time to put as many walls between you and the outside world, so that way you can stay as safe as possible. But again, the reason why we haven't moved on to the evening news at this hour is, again, because we have this tornado warning that stays with us for at least another 25 minutes to 30 minutes or so across the area. This is a look at what we're dealing with across the rest of the region. We have a tornado warning. We have intense storms. We have severe thunderstorm warnings in place across parts of the Arklamas. But it looks like once we get through this fairly intense wave of wet weather that's pushing through, things may ultimately start to quiet down. Let's take a look at what's going on with our graph model just to give you an idea of how things may play out over the next couple of hours. Again, this model shows that we'll still have wet weather and potentially stormy weather pushing across our region as we head through 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock. But by the time we get to 9 o'clock, the worst of this weather should be pushing east, and then eventually we will start to dry out. And when we look at our GFS model, this is a lower resolution model, but it can still let us know generally what's going to happen. We may see more rain to our south tomorrow, but we should be mainly dry here in the Arklamas. So if you're tired of the wet weather, you'll get a brief break Wednesday. But as we look ahead to Thursday, we'll see potentially some moisture move back across the region with the front, and then an upper level low will sit nearby us as we head throughout the weekend, and that'll keep more rain chances around us as well. So unfortunately, we're not drying out completely. We still have more rain chances for the later part of the weekend to the weekend, but in terms of what we're dealing with now, this is probably the worst we'll see over the next 7 days, and that is definitely a good thing. I mentioned that we're looking at drearier weather as we head into the weekend. It's all because of this cutoff low that weakens, but eventually it starts to set up and linger across our region as we head into the weekend. This is Friday. What's left of that cutoff low still out there, and it more or less drifts and sits right overhead. And when you have a cool pocket of air overhead with the sunshine during the day, that's where we typically start to see clouds develop and even more rain showers develop as well. But as we focus back in on the tornado warning, let's see if we have another update. It looks like they may have allowed that warning to expire. No, it's still in place. We still have that warning with us. And again, it stays with us at least through 6 p.m. We do have some severe thunderstorm warnings across other parts of the region. Farmerville, you're under a severe thunderstorm warning. At this point, that warning stays with us at least through 5:45 p.m. So you have another 10 minutes or so with that warning before an update will come in. And then farther to the east, we're dealing with warnings across Morehouse Parish, some of that now extending into Richland and Franklin parishes. And then outside of that, things are a little quieter. So the worst of the weather currently moving through northern Ouachita Parish, southern portions of Union Parish, and all of that is pushing towards Sterlington. So again, Sterlington, we want you to keep your guard up. If you're in Sterlington, around Sterlington, this is your time to stay indoors, get to the most interior part of your home. And as we put another track on the activity and push it out to the north and east, eventually we're looking for impacts down the line. Bastrop, you could potentially see impacts from what's left over of this storm as we get closer to 6 p.m. And then places like DeSeard, you'll potentially see impacts as we head toward 5:40. So we are dealing with a dangerous storm that's pushing through the area. This storm is continuing to push to the north and east, but generally more easterly in direction. And this is the area that we're watching with most concern in terms of rotation within a storm. And again, as we continue to track it, we're looking at Sterlington and then eventually places like Bastrop and Log Cabin downstream. Farther to the south, we're dealing with very heavy rain pushing through the Monroe area. If you have any family that would typically travel along Interstate 20 at this time, you probably should give them a heads up and let them know dangerous weather is pushing through the area. So maybe find a place to wait out the stormy weather until things improve. But again, this warning is of great concern. That's of the most important thing that we're following, and it stays with us at least through 6 p.m. I want to check in with the National Weather Service just to see if they have any additional information regarding the storm. At this point, we're seeing reports of trees down along Highway 557 and Elliott and Luna south of West Monroe. So we are starting to hear some reports of trees down, not necessarily associated with that part of the storm that's tornado warned. But again, we're dealing with impacts. And as the storms began to push in, we started to get reports of some street lights not working. So I suspect that's more or less what we're continuing to deal with at this hour with the stormy weather pushing through. Fortunately, it looks like the worst of the weather for Monroe has now pushed just to the east, but we're still tracking intense storms pushing across northern and eastern portions of Ouachita Parish. And as we continue to track this weather, it looks like the worst of the weather, at least with that tornado warned part of the storm, is now pushing towards Sterlington at this hour. So again, if you are in Sterlington, this is your time to stay indoors. Don't go outside. Don't try to look and see what's going on. Stay indoors until this worst weather has passed your area. As we look at what's happening with hail, potentially what storms are producing hail, we haven't seen a tremendous amount of hail today. We have had a few reports from viewers from earlier thunderstorms that they saw hail, for instance, in Indian Lakes. They seem to have picked up more hail today, and they've picked up hail from recent storms as well. But at this point, these storms are not producing a lot of hail. It's just a lot of heavy rain, gusty wind, and at least one tornado warning in our viewing area. So as I talk more about what's happening, I do want to give people a heads up on where the stormy weather is headed. Again, these storms are moving at about 50 miles per hour. We just had the really strong line move through the Monroe area. So as we put a track on these storms and push it farther out to the east, we want to give places like Mangum a heads up by 5:45. So within the next 5 minutes or so, we will see some of this stormy weather begin to impact you. Places like Winsboro, by the time we get to 5:52, if the storms continue to hold together, and then farther down the line for places like Tallulah by the time we get to 6:30 or so. So this stormy weather will continue to move across the region. But what's of greatest concern for us is the tornado warning. It looks like most of the storm is moving fairly quickly. Again, it's right now over the Sterlington area. We'll take another look at velocity just to see if we can see anything. It gets a little more challenging to see at this point because we're getting pretty far from the radars that we have access to. But generally, we're dealing with still a fairly potent storm system continuing to push across the area. So I do want to put the map into a loop just so you can see how storms have been progressing. This is a 3-hour loop, and storms have moved fairly quickly over that last 3-hour time frame. But again, these storms will continue to move across our region going forward. And we have started to see more reports in terms of some of the impacts we're feeling across the region. I know the National Weather Service has mentioned that at least they show a picture of a tree potentially struck by lightning that was on fire. So again, we saw a lot of lightning with the storms that were pushing in. And right now, as we deal with this tornado warning, we're continuing to see other alerts be issued as well. Flash flooding, again, a major threat with any storms that develop and move across our region this evening. So as we continue to track this stormy weather, we still have this tornado warning. We have another 20 minutes or so of this warning. And it has not been confirmed, still radar indicated, and we're not at this point seeing strong signs of any type of rotation on the ground or anything like that. So as of now, this looks like just a rotating thunderstorm that has a lot of energy with it and showing signs of potentially producing a tornado. So we haven't had any confirmation, so we don't know just yet if anything has touched down. But again, we still have this warning. It looks like the worst of the weather is now pushing into Morehouse Parish. So again, if you are in Bastrop, if you're in places like Oak Ridge, for instance, you're dealing with the threat for stormy weather for sure over the next 30 minutes to an hour. But after that, things should start to improve. So as we show you again how things will play out for us for this evening, just in case you're concerned, you want to know what can I expect going forward. What we are anticipating is that the worst of this weather begins to push out by the time we get to 8 or 9 o'clock. And then by the time we get to midnight, we'll see overall quieter weather. We'll likely notice still potentially some gusty wind, but outside of that, really no major issues. And by tomorrow morning, some of us could even see some peaks of sunshine before more cloud cover starts to build in. But really at the moment, we're dealing with this tornado warning, and so that is the most important thing that we are concerned with. But fortunately, we haven't had any confirmation of a tornado on the ground. When we look at what's happening with the storm activity, it looks like the most intense part of this storm, again, is now pushing across northern portions of Ouachita Parish, but I haven't seen anything in terms of whether or not they will potentially extend that warning. We still have another 18 minutes or so with this warning. So we will just have to watch and see how things play out. And storms could potentially spin up fairly quickly. This is a storm that spun up fairly quickly. And earlier today, we saw tornadic activity, or at least a couple of warnings issued in the Shreveport area. But this is the warning we're following, and the stormy weather itself is continuing now to push into Morehouse Parish and also pushing toward places like Rayville. So if you are in Rayville, for instance, right now, you'll start to see a lot of heavy rain. You'll hear some lightning and gusty wind, but the heavy rain by far will be the biggest impact. And then afterwards, things should start to improve for us. So if you are in places like Rayville, you have another hour or so to deal with this stormy weather before we start to see improvements. Again, this warning that's still in place for northern Ouachita Parish. I do want to show that if you are more or less closer to Downsville, you're more or less in the clear right now, so no concern for you there. But we're still watching southern portions of Union Parish at this hour, and again, northern portions of Ouachita Parish. For instance, if you have any family or friends that would typically travel along 165, let's say from Monroe to Sterlington or areas farther to the north, they'll be dealing with this dangerous weather now. So you may want to give them a heads up and let them know to hold off on travel until this dangerous weather clears out. But the worst of the weather for sure, moving through eastern portions of Ouachita Parish, impacting Interstate 20, and it will continue to push to the east. Again, when we look back to the west, if you are in places like Ruston, you technically still are under a severe thunderstorm warning, but the worst of the weather has moved out of your area, so you can enjoy that news as well. That's good news for you. The same goes for places like Quitman and also areas toward Jonesboro, but still in Winfield, they're dealing with intense rain and storms at this hour, and all of this connects back to the very intense weather that is currently moving into Richland Parish at this hour. So if you have any family or friends in Richland Parish, they're not under a severe thunderstorm. Where they are under a severe thunderstorm warning, they are not under a tornado warning. The tornado threat is still mainly in place across northern portions of Ouachita Parish. But as of now, that activity is pushing into Morehouse Parish. So we'll see what happens with that warning. Again, the warning is in red, that red box there. We'll have to see what happens with it, but it looks like most of the activity is now pushing off into Morehouse Parish. And so I suspect the National Weather Service typically doesn't end the tornado warnings early, at least not this early. We still have another 15 minutes or so with that warning. But because of the activity pushing into Morehouse Parish at this hour, I suspect that they will, if they think the storm has enough rotation, they may extend it into Morehouse Parish. But outside of that, I suspect they'll let that warning expire. So if you are north and west of Monroe, let's say from a line from Monroe to Farmerville, as of now, you are in the clear from any type of dangerous weather impacting you. The active weather with this storm is now pushing off into far eastern Ouachita Parish, northeastern Ouachita Parish, and also southern portions of Morehouse Parish. So the threat for dangerous weather still with us. We have another about 15 minutes or so with this warning. If this warning is allowed to expire potentially earlier, or if it is allowed to expire in general, what we'll likely do is get you ready for our 6 o'clock newscast, which starts again at 6 o'clock, and it'll run per usual. But right now, the threat for tornadoes, at least we have one tornado warning that's in place across the viewing area. Outside of that, we have severe thunderstorm warnings that are continuing to push across the area. I do want to take a look at what's happening across the region, because we are starting to see signs that things are quieting down behind this most active part of the storm. For instance, if you have any family or friends in the Shreveport area, they're dealing with just rain at this hour. And really a flash flooding concern as well. But the active weather, the most dangerous part of the weather, seems to have pushed east of Shreveport. And again, it's pushing through our region now. But we should start to see some improvements over the next couple of hours. But this is a look at satellite and radar things are much quieter back to the west. If you have any family or friends that will be traveling from Dallas to Monroe, for instance, you may want to give them a heads up and tell them to hold off just a bit until this stormy weather pushes east. And we'll have to keep an eye to what happens farther to the south. So far, these storms haven't been as intense as the ones we've seen move across our region, but it is something that we will continue to watch. But the worst of the stormy weather is continuing to track east along Interstate 20, and it will impact places like Rayville over the next 10 minutes or so, and then areas farther downstream as we continue to watch the storms move. Again, we're dealing with a tornado watch. The one thing that they did do, we have new information that watch has been extended all across the viewing area with the exception of South Arkansas. So every parish in Louisiana in our viewing area and really across North Louisiana now has a tornado watch. And I suspect that watch will likely go a little bit later than 9 p.m., potentially 10 or 11 p.m. And it extends farther east into central portions of Mississippi as well. So it looks like these storms may keep some of their strength. And so that's something we'll be following as we head throughout the next couple of hours. Generally speaking, we're under a slight risk for severe weather. That typically means isolated to scattered storms. At times, under certain situations, we can see numerous severe storms. That's more or less what we're dealing with right now. And threats include damaging wind, hail, and even tornadoes. And at this point, we have one tornado warning that's in place. Outside of that tornado threat, heavy rain has been a threat for us. We're still waiting to see if we get additional reports of any flooding, but we do know that there are some flash flood warnings to our west, and some of that is extending into our region. So flooded roads will be a threat, and overall tough travel with this weather will be an issue for us as well. When we look at the additional rain that still could fall from now through really midnight, the heaviest of the rain will likely be to our south, but we still could see areas pick up at least 2, maybe even 3 inches more of rain. So significant rain on the way. We've had our fair share of rain over the last couple of weeks, and unfortunately, we're getting additional amounts as we speak. Again, as we track storms pushing farther to the east, the worst of the weather should be pushing out of the area by the time we get to about 10 or 11 p.m. While they did extend that tornado watch, again, we'll have to see if we get any additional warnings issued farther to the east. So we have to keep our guard up through the evening. But as we look ahead to tomorrow morning, things should be a lot quieter for us, and we'll keep plenty of clouds around throughout the day. Although this model is indicating we may see some of that cloud activity break up, I suspect there'll be more clouds than sunshine, but either way, we are talking about temperatures reaching into the low and mid 80s when it's all said and done. So let's go back to that warning that is in place. Again, it stays with us for another 10 minutes or so. If you're just tuning in and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's going on, what's happening, why are we dealing with this stormy weather? It's really due in part to a lot of ingredients coming together, a strong upper level flow pushing a lot of moisture into our region, and then also really just an active upper level system that's just helping to trigger some of these storms as well. When we look at that warning, it looks like the most active part of the weather, actually all of the stormy weather, has now pushed into Morehouse Parish. I want to check and see if the National Weather Service has mentioned anything. As of now, we haven't had any official confirmation, but we have had some reports of at least an observed tornado near Red Cut Road and Prairie Road area, but they don't have any photos to confirm that. So we still have to wait and see if we get any pictures. But again, it looks like most of the active weather has pushed off into Morehouse Parish. So if you are in Bastrop, Oak Ridge, any of those areas between, keep your guard up. Even though you're not technically under a tornado warning, you still may be dealing with the storm that is more or less producing dangerous conditions. So maybe a brief spin up here or there. But it looks like, again, that the most active part of the stormy weather has pushed into Morehouse Parish. So as of now, for all intents and purposes, it looks like if you're still under that tornado warning, you may be doing much better. It's just really the far eastern portions of Ouachita Parish. So we want to keep our guard up for places like Colliston, that's just outside of Ouachita Parish. Swartz, we want you to keep your guard up as well. But it looks like most of the stormy weather has more or less moved outside of that tornado warning. And so with that, I think what we'll do, we'll stay on air for a little bit longer, but since most of the active weather has pushed out of that tornado warning, again, we may just get you ready for the 6 p.m. newscast. Still waiting on an update from the National Weather Service in terms of what's going to happen with that warning. But again, that's something that we're dealing with now. So let's give you a quick recap. And since that stormy weather has pushed out of the warning, after the recap, we'll more or less send you to commercial, and then we'll get ready to come on KNOE for the newscast at 6 p.m. So as we talk about what we've been dealing with, we have this tornado warning that still is active, but the worst of the weather has actually moved outside of that tornado warning. Farther to the south, we're still dealing with powerful storms moving through Richland and Franklin Parish. But as we talk about what else has been happening, some isolated storms moving across east and west Carroll parishes, but the worst of the weather at this point, Morehouse and northern portions of Richland Parish. When we look at the largest storm system, it's impacting our region now. A lot of areas north, let's say north of Louisiana, haven't quite dealt with as many severe storms. Most of the activity has been farther south and definitely across eastern portions of Texas. This is a look at the latest information. Originally, well, we still have a flood watch that stays with us at least through Wednesday morning, but this tornado watch has been expanded all across the viewing area. And so that's something we'll keep an eye on for sure, whether or not we get any more severe weather developing. But it's really now through the evening. By the time we get to midnight, the worst of the weather should be out of the area, and flooded roads, that'll be concerned. Tough travel for sure, but we'll be watching for strong gusty winds that develop with any thunderstorms as well. When we look at how much rain could accumulate across the region, additional rain, some areas could still pick up at least 2, if not 3 inches more of rain. So that is something that we'll be concerned with. And as we time things out, stormy weather continues to push across our region. But by 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., the worst of the weather should be out of the area. As we summarize your forecast right now, we're expecting temperatures tonight to eventually drop into the mid 60s. Stormy weather now, but quieter weather does take over. And we'll notice quieter weather as we head into tomorrow as well. Temperatures still, though, on the warmer side, reaching into the low and mid 80s. Here's a look at the 7-day forecast. Again, we may deal with more rain and thunderstorms on Thursday, a low chance of severe weather then. And then we'll be watching for rain chances over the weekend as we get ready to celebrate Mother's Day. So what we'll do now is we'll send you back to regular programming, and we will come back on if they extend that tornado warning. But as of now, it looks like the storm has more or less is no longer under that actual warning, even though that warning is still in place. So again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your patience. And we'll be back with your news at 6 coming up.